Hello, my name's Michael Keneally, and this is a presentation on Pluto in your astrology birth chart. In fact, it's part one, and there's two parts altogether. And this is Mythic Keys to Deep Understanding of Pluto in your astrology birth chart in your life. And we're filming this at a very appropriate place. This is Lister Gill. This is the biggest cairn in Carrow Moor, one of the most ancient sacred sites of Ireland, much older than Newgrange, much older than Stonehenge. And basically, one reason this is so appropriate is that the monument where for thousands of years the ancient Irish buried their dead is orientated to where the sun rises on the morning of Halloween, or Samhain, as the festival is often called, one of the ancient 8 great festivals. And of course, Samhain is the feast of the dead. And the ancient Irish saw it as the time when the veils between the worlds are thin. And indeed, at this time, the Morrigan, the war goddess of the ancient Irish, mated year after year with the good god of the land and the sky, the Dagda. And they stood astride the river Unshin or Unius, which has its mouth into the Atlantic Ocean just by here. And this is obviously a splendid monument. And so many of these ancient places have energies in the ground put there by the ancient people who used them for thousands of years. And if you attune to this, well, what I personally got was, sort of utter silence. A sort of dark, total connection to the world of the ancestors and the dead there in the remote silence. And there are very different energies in the other sacred sites, and we can take you to them through our Druid Forest School. So what better place to look at, to hear, to understand the mythic keys to the planet Pluto, to understanding Pluto in your life, based on where Pluto appears in your birth chart. Now you can have an astrology reading with me, or you can do one of my astrology courses. And they're very, very sort of genuine courses, because throughout them you focus on 2 charts, yours and mine, looking at where each of the planets in turn appears in the charts. And so, it's not head stuff, it's genuine, authentic sharing between 2 living people on their lives. You can check out if it rings true or not. So Pluto. So the first mythic key is the Pluto-Persephone myth. So basically, Hades, lord of the underworld, looked up and he saw a girl picking beautiful narcissi innocently. In fact, she was the daughter of the earth goddess. Her name was Persephone. And he desired her. So he mounted his chariot drawn by black horses, breathing fire. He erupted out of the underworld, and he took her down into the underworld, offering her that if she stayed with him, she would be his queen and wife. And that shows you part of the energy that Pluto represents. Each of the planets radiates an energy which we experience. And how we handle it depends on our level of consciousness, but also on our karmas, our scripts. Okay, so basically, Pluto from that myth is about deep power and transformation. And so if as a child you grow up in a Pluto-charged atmosphere, you soon sense that things aren't really what they seem, that there are deep energies around and underneath. And so you can develop a sense of always looking out for these. It's not an easy energy to deal with. It can be misused. But of course, it's incredible transformation. So the second myth that's relevant to understanding Pluto is Hercules and the slaying of the Hydra. So basically, the Hydra had 9 heads. It was a hideous monster. It was persecuting humanity. Hercules was a hero. He came up and he sort of cut one, but then he had to cut another, and he had to cut another. And they kept coming back. So in the end, Hercules lifted the Hydra out of the stagnant swamp it dwelt in, and he exposed it to the light of day, and that killed it. After that, he could cut the 9 heads off and gain the jewel that the Hydra had been guarding. So this shows us that our feelings must not be left festering, one evil head arising after another from a monster. And our lives can be like that. We can cling to past hurts. And so they need to be brought to the light of day. And what is the jewel we gain when we face those evil heads? It's liberation from pain. So our instincts, our purposes for living, what we came to achieve here, mustn't be left festering in a stagnant swamp. They must be brought out into the open, the enemies killed, so that we can stand clear as our own hero. A third mythic key to Pluto is the myth of Ishtar and Ereshkigal. So this is a myth from ancient Babylon. Ishtar was the beautiful, radiant queen of heaven. But she had to descend into the underworld to attend the funeral of the husband of her sister, Ereshkigal, who was queen of the underworld. And the journey went really badly, the journey to the underworld. It got worse and worse for Ishtar. She was forced to give up her clothing one after the other. She was forced to give up her possessions. She was eventually hung up on a hook by the denizens of the underworld and utterly brought low. This is what can happen in our life most certainly, and particularly during Pluto or related periods. And so great was the grief and rage of Ishtar's sister, of Ereshkigal, that none of the gods did anything. And so, to punish the world, they left it bereft of light. And humanity petitioned the gods to sort the situation out. And eventually a solution was found. The gods fashioned 2 mourners, and they came to the grieving and ruined Ishtar, and they listened to her grief, and they listened to her rage, and she felt understood, she felt honoured. And so Ishtar returned glorious to the skies. Humanity had light and warmth again. And so being listened to is so important in a Pluto transit type of experience. It's so important in healing a Pluto type wound embedded in your birth chart and therefore embedded in your life. And there's one final mythic key to Pluto. I almost shouldn't say their name. The Arañas. The Furies. So basically what happened was that Uranus was the sky god married to the earth goddess Gaia, and he turned out to be a tyrant, so unappreciative of his children. He was radiating his lightning energies. He was exalted, but his children were left unfathered. And so he even imprisoned them back in the womb of his consort because he didn't, value them. So basically, one of his children castrated him. And where the severed genitals fell on the water, Aphrodite was born. But where they fell on the land, the unnameable were born, the Furies. And why are they unnameable? Because the ancient Greeks knew that if you named them, they might hear you. And if they heard you, they might come. And we can be pursued by the Furies. And particularly it said this happens to those who offend against the laws of nature. And of course the classic case is Oedipus. The oracle at Delphi voiced the fate that Oedipus had, that he would sleep with his mother and kill his father. In his attempts to avoid doing that, innocently he walked into the karmic trap and did it. And so the Furies pursued him across the face of the earth to the end of his life. And so these are 4 useful mythic keys to understanding the energy of Pluto and what we experience from Pluto in the birth chart and Pluto transit. So now listen to part 2, which is a more astrological presentation of Pluto. But these mythic keys are really important.